Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host, Karen McQuestion, the best Karen out there. How are you?
I'm on TikTok now, and I had to come up with a little logo or a little identifier, and it said best-selling author and one of the better Karens, because, my name has become a pejorative, so I have to defend all of us Karens out there.
That's right. Well, you're my favorite Karen, and I'm excited to catch up with you. I mean, when I was gone, I really missed our little weekly chats. So what's going on with you?
Well, this is exciting news in the McQuestion household. My youngest child is now the best educated one in the household. He got his master's degree, and so that was thrilling, and now has a job in his field. But this is the funny part, the thing I wanted to tell you. He came to me and said, "Will you proofread my master's thesis?" And I was so honored because he's very private. He's also my Sheldon Cooper kid, if you're familiar with The Big Bang Theory. So he thinks like the books that I write that's really cute, that I've got a thing that I do. But sometimes I wonder if he really respects the novel writing process. But anyway, so he asked me to proofread it, and he said, just for typos and such, I don't think you'll really understand most of it. And I, of course, was offended and said, I think you'd be surprised what I understand. And and you know what? Just between us, I really didn't understand most of it.
What's his subject?
This one was about artificial intelligence. And I have trouble with regular intelligence. So his degree was in data science, and the paper was on duplicating a data set given the parameters. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore.
Wow.
There were a lot of
that sounds very hard.
And different things. And so I went to Greg, and I was like, no, I always knew Jack was very smart. He always did well in school. In fact, he was picked on for being too smart. And in fourth grade, he had some difficulty with some kids. And the teacher told me that a girl said, he always is using those big words and he thinks he's smarter than us. And I came home and told Jack that. And he said, but I am smarter than them. And what do you say? Try not to be? They don't like it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So he's finally coming to his own. And I asked Greg, I'm like, is Jack a genius? And he's like, well, I don't know about a genius. Which of course, Greg is, to me, he's a genius. So, I feel like a first grader talking about kids in high school, but anyway, so that's the story.
It is amazing how our kids, well, first of all, you think, well, you have two adopted ones, so I guess that's kind of a different thing too. But, you kind of assume, well, maybe they'll be the same type of smart that I am or whatever. And both my daughters are super great at math. One's is studying chemistry. I'm just like, who are you people?
And is that from the paternal side of the family?
Well, I have a brother who actually is probably a genius. He would be able to understand Jack's paper. He has a PhD in philosophy from Brown. And so I think they must get all that from my brother, I guess. I mean, it skipped me 100%. But then again, they're like, my older one, especially, she's like, how could you possibly want to write every day? It's horrible. Who would want to do that? I'm like, really? Who would want to study chemistry?
To each his own, I guess.
Yeah,
wow.
I guess so. Well, that's exciting. Tell him congratulations. And
I will. And I wanted to take him out to eat or do something. And he was like, no, I don't think we'll be doing that. He's a very old soul.
I love it.
I remember one time my sister said, most people as they grow up become the person they're going to be. Jack started out being that person, and he just had to wait to get there.
My older daughter's kind of like that.
Really?
I always used to, it's like she was 3 going on 30, and she's finally caught up to the right age. It's crazy. Well, that's great news. And it's great that he found a job already and everything. Wow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
something. They all grow up, and he's already talking about getting his doctorate. And I was like, I am not calling you Dr. McQuestion. I don't care how many degrees you have.
He's like, whatever, Karen.
That is pretty much what he said. Oh,
Oh, well, that is great news. We also have a wonderful guest today, and I think especially women's fiction and romance, clean and sweet romance authors will find this one to be really interesting. So we'll go ahead and let everybody enjoy the interview. Welcome to another episode of Behind the Book. Today we have Jodi Allen Brice, who has written numerous books under a different pen name, which we're going to get into later. She writes under Jodi Allen Brice, fiction and small town clean and sweet romance. She transitioned away from paranormal romance in the year 2020 when the virus hit. She said she felt she needed to write a book that would change hearts and minds where Christ is concerned. She is a Christian who loves studying Bible prophecy and spending time with her family in Arkansas. She's also an avid quilter and camper. Sometimes she does both at the same time. That seems impossible, but having...
Okay, let me say camping in a camper, not a tent. I'm too old for that.
Oh, all right, some glamping and quilting
Yes.
together sounds better. Yeah. Well, welcome to the show. We've been excited to talk to you, and I'm curious to delve more into your transition from one pen name to the other. But first, let's start at the beginning. Tell us about your path to publication. Did you always want to be a novelist?
I actually wanted to be a librarian because I wanted to be around books all the time. When I was little, like 5 years old, I would get behind the recliner and get the piano bench, and I would have a bookcase and I would check all these books out for my stuffed animals. So yeah, it didn't work out like that, but
That's so cute.
well, my mom didn't think it was so cute because I had my little stamp and I would stamp in the book. Like when you really check out, that wasn't a good thing for her. So, actually, my first book that I wrote, I had just moved to Arkansas, did not know anybody here, was very lonely. I've always been a really avid reader. And so one summer I sat down and I wrote my first book. It actually sold to a small press in Atlanta. I didn't do very well as far as sales, and I started looking around at indie authors, and I bought my rights back from that book and wrote a sequel to that. And then since then, I've published everything that I've written.
and so what year was it that you first published your first book?
Gosh, let me think. 2007, maybe.
So you were kind of right on that cusp before indie publishing really became a thing.
Right.
You followed that trend. That was smarter than some of us. I'm not going to mention any names myself.
Tess, you're doing fine. We're not going to feel sorry for you.
Yeah, right now anyway. It's taken a while, but
This is something I'm really curious about, Jodi. In 2020, obviously there were lots of changes for everyone, but for you, there was a huge transition from what you had been writing previously to your current genre. Can you tell us how you came to that decision?
This was right before everybody kind of knew about this virus was coming. And I was actually at a writer retreat in Colorado. And that's when they were saying we're going to close international flights. So I started getting kind of worried. I wasn't flying international. But when I got to the airport, I saw it looked like, like an apocalypse. People were crowded in, pushing, trying to get to there. It was freaky. So when I finally got home, got over that, calmed down a little bit, I would go outside on my patio and I would try to write, and I could not write. I still have these two books in the next two series. One's a werewolf series and the other one's a vampire series. And I just could not physically write anything out. So I said, well, I still want to write, that's really what I want to do. What if I wrote something totally new under a different pen name? And so the first book that I wrote was So This Is Goodbye. That was a standalone, and published it. And since that was last year, that first book came out. And then I wrote a small town series. It's the Harlan Creek series. I started that last year. It's still going on. Since I started writing under that different genre and different pen name, it's been like I'm writing ahead. I've got my schedule for next year. It's like, I don't know, it's just coming out more naturally, more authentically. And I'm happy,
Yeah, that's so interesting. So it was clearly the right move for you. Like that's
Yeah.
what you needed to kind of jumpstart your creativity.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I needed
Did you?
something that wasn't dark because paranormal tends to be dark. Even though I write a lot of snark in my books, it's snarky. But, I felt like everybody, especially during that time, needed something positive and hopeful and small town and homey and cozy. And so that's where I am.
So do you feel like you consciously made that choice, or is that just what came out of you?
Probably a little bit of both. I have always read paranormal. I've always been drawn to that. So I thought, well, that's just what I'm going to write, from here on out. And I actually had other paranormal authors are like, well, if you go clean romance, clean and wholesome, you're not going to make the money that you do in paranormal. And that's actually not true. But anyway, so that's just more confirmation that I am on the right track. So, and I'm happy with it.
So if somebody is not familiar with your books, and this would be with this new pen name, this new genre, where would you suggest they start?
I would start with the Harlan Creek series. The first book, Promise Kept, is free right now. That small town romance, second chance romance, friends to lovers romance, but clean and wholesome. All the good tropes that we normally like. I've written the Laurel Cove series, which is my Lake House series, which I love those covers. They're more women's fiction, and it is about women overcoming changes in their life when they're older. Because when you think you're older and you're kind of, okay, we've been all through the hard stuff, we can relax a little. But these women have things that happen that they have to start over again. And I'm getting a lot of good reviews from my readers with that series as well.
It's interesting that you said that about the women's fiction thing, because I really struggle with this with my own stuff, and our books are kind of similar in that I'm like, I'm never sure, are they romances or women's fiction? Like, what's your take on that? Like, how do you differentiate those two?
For me, it's about her journey. There's some romance in it, but that's secondary. She's overcoming these difficulties and these unexpected things that happen. Like the first book is about a 40-year-old woman and having to start her life over again. And I set it in a lake house. I know I love a beach read. This is like a beach read, but I'm in Arkansas and everybody here has a lake house. And I just love a lake house. But they do get a happy ending. It's throughout the series, but it's not the driving force of, I like that it's her story.
For sure. I want to get back to something you mentioned earlier where you talked about incorporating tropes into your fiction, because that's something we've talked about before on the show, right, Tess?
Oh,
that
yeah.
Sometimes authors get kind of beat up for using tropes, like it's a shortcut or it's, somehow lazy writing. But we love tropes, and I think readers do too. Is that something that you consciously choose to incorporate, or are you just drawn to it?
I think I'm just drawn to it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different. Like each book is different. It's a different trope. It's not the same, especially in my Harlan Creek. It's like best friends to, not lovers, but happily ever after. The third one in that book is more like Pride and Prejudice, like Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. And I love that. I mean, that's like my favorite book ever and my favorite trope. And sometimes it's hard for me to say, okay, this trope is ... because it'll have different elements in there. I think probably subconsciously I'm doing it.
So now we want to get to the part about the nuts and bolts of being a writer. What does a writing day look like for you, and do you outline your books?
I do not outline. I cannot outline. I'm a pantser. I can tell you how the story will start and how it will end. In between, I don't know. I let the characters tell me. I think that's the fun part of writing, and that's just how my brain works. If I knew how to outline, I would probably write more books than I can now. But that's not me. So a normal day would be I get up early, have my quiet time. I either go to the gym or I go for a walk and then get dressed, get ready. And then I have a word goal that I try to meet for the day. And if I'm really in the mood and I go over it, then I'm like, okay, that's good. So I keep going. The afternoon is when I try to do some administrative work like newsletters or promos or that kind of thing. I've just hired a new assistant, so that's helping me. So I'm having to train her a little bit, so that takes some time. But I usually quit about 4:30 or 5. I like to make dinner for my husband. So after that, it's just like us. The days that he is on call, like the weekends or whatever, I'm like, I kind of get a little excited because I'm like, I could just write and not stop and eat when I want or whatever. So that's usually a typical writing day for me.
At what point do you share a work in progress? Who are your first readers?
I've recently started sending a chapter to another author, and we kind of look, it's not a critique. It's like kind of looking for plot holes or, hey, this didn't make sense. But the first, once it's finished, I have an art team and I have a couple that are really good. Like they can spot stuff that I didn't even know. I usually send it to those people early and say, okay, if there's any mistakes or any plots or there's a question, let me know. But those are usually my first fresh eyes on the finished product.
And how big is your ARC team?
Probably 50. I'm trying to grow it a little bit. I've heard different things about different ways to do an ARC team. So I'm considering doing something different. But I have, the solid ones that I'll always keep, that'll always be there. So they'll always be on my list.
Do you keep a list of story ideas as they come to mind?
Oh gosh, yes. Before I actually got published and I had written that one book, I had started probably 2 or 3 other books. I'd never finished them, but I saved them. And every time I get a different computer, I have to make sure all those files are over there because you never know when you're going to need them. But yeah, I do. I don't ever really throw anything out. I think every idea can be recycled into something readable and a good story.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back about your series because we recently did a episode about series and just, kind of how do we plan them out and that sort of thing. I tend to plan out kind of at least the characters at the beginning of each, series. So I kind of is that what you do as well, or do you kind of pants that too?
Well, I know like the first book, I know who my main characters are. And when I do the second book, I'll pull some of those characters, but then I have to add some. I have to grow it out. It's kind of like a spider web. That's kind of how it usually happens. Right now, I'm actually working on a cozy mystery that's set in the Harlan Creek town, and it's a bunch of quilters because I quilt. It's a bunch of older ladies that quilt that actually solve the mystery, and it's funny.
That's fun.
And they have a pet goat that's in the first book. So I have to keep a series Bible of all of these names and what they do and what they look like. But yeah, it's just because that series is doing so well and my readers really respond to snarky older people. When I wrote my werewolf book, that series, I had a grandma that sold questionable items. I don't know if I should say, but she was very snarky. And, my readers were like, well, is Granny going to be in the next book? Is she going to be in the next book? So I think I play well to that audience that likes that.
Well, and it's interesting how you kind of discover that sometimes, you don't consciously do it. And then you realize, oh, people really respond. It's like I have a psychic character named Moonstone in my romantic mysteries. And I just tossed her in there in the first book, never thinking, oh, people will love Moonstone. Wow. They want more Moonstone. Yeah. So it's interesting how that works out sometimes.
Yes.
So is there a writing craft book that you would recommend to aspiring authors?
I have taken writing craft classes. I went to, oh my gosh, I can't think of her name, in Colorado. Margie Lawson.
Yes.
I did her retreat. I did all of her workshops online and then went there. And she's excellent. It is such a lot of information that I have to still go back and look and pull things that, will work. The best thing that has helped me, honestly, is reading. You've heard other authors say that, and you're like, is that really true? Well, yeah, it is. Because you learn pacing and you learn the dialogue between the characters. And to me, that's incredibly helpful.
So what writing advice would you offer
Read.
to a beginner? Just keep reading.
Keep reading. And I would say start somewhere. When I first wrote my first book, I didn't know any of the rules. None. I went to an RWA. It was a local chapter in Memphis. And you were supposed to bring your first chapter, and everybody was going to critique it. And I made the mistake of writing it. It's the heroine. She's describing herself, like her beautiful blonde hair, whatever. And they're like, well, the characters don't describe themselves. Somebody's got to be looking. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. But there's some basic things you probably need to know. But I would just jump in and write something down. It can always be fixed later. And that book was fixed later. So.
Do you have an ideal reader in mind? We always use the example of Stephen King says he writes for his wife.
I think that my ideal reader is somebody that's going to relate to that character, whatever that character is going through. For instance, in Lake House Promises, the first book, she has just found out that her husband's had an affair with a very much younger woman than, she is. So I'm thinking, how would she feel? And all of these things that you weave into the story. So when I write to that character, I'm writing to the woman that's been through this. And I'm hoping that it will give them hope. I'm hoping that, you still got to plug along and don't quit fighting, and just something that will encourage them.
I love that you think about somebody who would be in that I've never heard that answer before.
Oh,
and
really?
I've never thought about it that way. I love that. Yeah, because it actually can shape your purpose so much more if you think of it that way. Yeah, I love that.
And it also shows how readers insert themselves into the story. Even if they haven't experienced that exact thing, they know the feelings behind what the character's experiencing.
Yeah, and actually, I was just listening to another podcast, and oh gosh, of course, I'm not going to remember her name, but the woman is like an expert in story and what it does to your brain. And I guess reading being immersed in fiction, it does the same things to your brain as if they were really truly happening to you. So which I find absolutely fascinating.
Yeah. When I write, I tend to do that. I had an author tell me one time, because we were talking about how fast she wrote, and she said, you have to stay in the story. She says, that's how I get so many words. I don't leave that story. I am that person that's going through. She's writing to get some resolution to what's going on in the book.
Now, to veer over to the business end of things, do you have any marketing tips for authors?
No.
Or well, what's your favorite way to connect with readers?
I am on Facebook, on my Facebook page, Jodi Allen Brice. I try to stay active over there. Newsletter is key. I think it's very important. That's something that you own. If Facebook shuts down tomorrow, whatever, you still have your subscribers to your newsletter. So I do those things. And I do ads from time to time, Facebook and Amazon. I've not done any BookBub ads yet. I need to, though.
Isn't it always, there's another thing on the list? Like you never quite get through all of it. Right. It's like,
and now there's
really should be doing those.
You need to do TikTok and you need to, yeah.
And you also have to weigh how valuable is it, because the investment in time and energy is no small thing.
Right. Exactly. Is it worth it to put all my time in that or just write the next book? I battle that daily.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, especially because I would really prefer just to be writing, and there's all these other things on my list.
Me too.
What do you think you would be doing if you weren't an author?
If I was not an author, I don't know. I love looking at houses, so maybe a real estate agent or interior decorator. I love, I mean, I need to decorate my house more, but I don't have time. But I find those two things fascinating. I really do.
You mentioned staying in the story. When you're writing, how consumed are you with the stories in your books? Do you feel like you're carrying it around with you even when you're not writing?
I'm still in the back of my head. I'm still thinking about it. Like if I get to, because I don't plot. So if I get to a point where I'm not sure what should happen next, I'll leave the house. I'll go for a walk, or I'll go get a coffee or something. And then I just kind of daydream and kind of think of things. And that gets me unstuck. As far as, do I carry it with me? I would just say in the back of my head. I mean, I don't worry about it as I'm cooking dinner or whatever. If something pops in my head, then I'll write it down. But yeah.
Have you ever started a manuscript and then made the deliberate decision not to finish it?
Yes. The paranormal. And I still get emails from readers like, well, I need the next vampire housewife, book, or I need the next werewolf book. And will I ever write it? I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Well, and that's a tough one. Do you tell them that?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, you do. You're honest about it.
I'm actually under a different pen name now, if you would like. I know you like it's very funny. Come on over to this side.
Yeah. No vampires, but there's still some housewives. So,
right.
there's a transition there. Yeah. I mean, that's actually a question I'm curious about. Like, do you find, because Karen and I talk about this all the time, do you find that even though it's a different subgenre, do you feel like the books are still kind of the same?
Yes, because I have always been more character driven. You're either heavily plot or heavily character. And I think from years of writing, I think I'm character driven. Even though they were doing these supernatural things, the same issues they are facing, or what my small town people are, or my lake house, series that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also think the author's voice is the same.
So
if they like your writing style in one and they find you to be a writer whose story they can sink into, that's going to be the same thing in a different genre.
And I've had, some paranormal readers cross over to this new, and they were like, oh, well, I've never read small town romance. I didn't know that I would like it, but I liked it. And I'm like, see, just trust me.
You're right. Yeah, I remember that when I first started with my historicals. A lot of my early readers were like, "Well, I don't really read historical." I'm like, "Well, just give this one a chance and see what you think."
Right.
Yeah, and so I think as readers we get stuck in this idea of, "Oh, I don't like that kind of book." Whereas if you actually open it up, you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is a great story." I can't wait to find out what happens next.
So, Jodi, on those days when you just don't feel like sitting down and writing, what do you do to jumpstart your creativity?
Well, my husband converted my treadmill into an actual writing desk. Mm-hmm. So I'll get my notebook and I'll stand up there and I'll just kind of write some ideas. And that has helped me more than anything.
And did he do that knowing you would like that?
Yeah, I've been on him for like months to do it. He was like, okay. I don't know, because my rails they're not flat, and he would have to build something. And I was like, well, I don't want to spend a lot of money on a new one. I already have one. And so I made a design. I wrote it down. And I was like, see, this is all you have to do.
Oh, God bless him that he did it. That's a good husband for you right there. Do you have a why when it comes to your fiction? Like, you've already touched upon this a little bit, but maybe give us a little bit more insight into what you're trying to give your readers.
I think my why would probably be, it's not always going to look so dark. There is always hope. I think people tend to give up too soon in whatever facet of life, in a relationship or at a job or what are their dreams. And I wanted them to see some hope and encouragement in my books. Like, just hang on just a little bit longer. You don't know what's around the corner.
So do you generally have happy endings?
Yes. The standalone, I'm trying to think about my standalone book. For my main character, yes, it was a happy ending. She had to leave some friendships behind that were not healthy for her. So that was kind of sad. But as far as yes, I think all my books have happy endings.
I'm a big fan of happy endings.
Yes.
Yeah, me too. yeah, that's it. I say any kind of story I like if it has a good character and a decent ending. I just hate it when they end and you're like, wait, no, I hung in here for 400 pages and
I
now you've
know.
done this to me.
So what are you working on right now, Jodi?
So I'm working on it's called The Mystery of the Teacup Quilt. And it's a cozy mystery. It's the ladies that are in Harlan Creek, the older ladies. They're going to be the sleuths that solve these, that help. I mean, the police don't want them involved for obvious reasons. They're going to do it anyway. And I'm almost finished with this book. So that should come out September, I believe.
Is this the first cozy mystery you've ever written?
Yeah.
It is.
It is.
What made you decide to do that?
I don't know. So my friends laugh at me. I love watching Father Brown mysteries. Have you ever watched that?
Yeah.
Okay. I love Father Brown. I'm not Catholic, but I love Father Brown. The whole thing. I've just always loved mysteries. When I was younger, I read Agatha Christie, anything that was a mystery. But I know a lot of cozy mysteries are paranormal, but this is not paranormal. I think it's got an animal in it. So, it's animal cozy mystery hobby because of quilting. It's a challenge because it's so different from anything I've written. So I've had to a little bit plot, a little bit, I'm not going to lie. So once I'm finished this week with it, I'll probably go back and read and make sure I've got all my things lined up and whatever. But it's actually going faster than I expected.
That's interesting. That's probably telling you something right there,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah. And it's written in first person, which when I wrote the Vampire Housewife series, that was written in first person. I find it very interesting.
How long does it take you to write a book, generally speaking?
Generally, I can probably write a book in a month and a half. It just depends.
Wow.
Well, if I've got nothing else and I know where the story's going, then I can knock it out. But there are days that I get stuck and I have to think about where it's going to go. So it's hard for me to pin down exactly.
Still, that's really impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I've been trying to build my productivity, but without much success. You and Tess are an inspiration to me.
Well,
But it's true. It's like I always say, oh, I'm a fast writer if I know the story. And since I'm also not a plotter, it's a tricky little situation that we find ourselves in.
it is. And then once you have it in your head, like you could write all night. You're like, oh, I know. Okay.
And I think there's an element of being disciplined that maybe I don't have. Do you know what I mean? Or I go down a rabbit hole with what you were talking about, administrative tasks, promotion or marketing, or, I think you have to be very goal oriented.
Well, that can be learned. I'm a list maker. I like a paper planner. I like, checking things off. And that has helped me to be more disciplined.
Yeah, that's interesting. Have you gone through the strength class?
Yes.
Becca Syme's. Yeah. What do you remember your top 5?
I wrote it down, actually. Let me see. Oh, my first one is futuristic.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
The second one is the deliberative. Empathy was high. Oh, connectivity. And then intellectual was the other one.
Interesting.
And
okay.
for those of our listeners like me that are completely clueless, could you explain what you just described?
Oh my gosh. So the only one that I can really describe is futuristic. And I think that's with me being a pantser. I took the test. She was with me when I took the test with some other writers. A lot of them had similar things. And she got to me and everybody had something like activator or something. And what their top one was. And she says, well, yours is futuristic. I'm like, I know, I'm so embarrassed. And she's like, no, that's a good thing. Like, you
Well,
know when a genre is going to take off, or you know where the story is supposed to go. That's why you don't plot.
Now, I'm still befuddled.
Okay.
Becca Symes is someone who counsels writers and has books
Yeah.
and is a
Yeah.
speaker. And she has
Yeah.
a test that you take?
Well, it's the
Yeah,
strength
so it's
finders, isn't it, test?
yeah, it's yes, the Clifton Strength, which is not
Oh,
her
okay.
system. That
I've heard of that.
been around
Okay.
for a while, yeah. But what she did is she has basically incorporated that system into something just for writers.
Okay.
And it's absolutely fascinating once you find out kind of what your strengths are. And the theory behind Clifton is that instead of focusing on what you're not good at and trying to get better at that, you focus on what you are good at and becoming even better at those things.
Right.
And so through this coaching and et cetera, you kind of figure that out. And it's really insightful as far as, like, for me, one of mine is I can only focus on one thing at a time. And because I was trying to write a book in the morning and a book in the afternoon, and I'm like, okay, no, I can't do that because I'm immersed like completely in whatever I'm doing. And so it's stuff like that, just insights into, and also it just gives you a chance to let yourself off the hook. It's like, okay, well, that's not something I'm good at, so I'm not going to do it, so that's okay.
What was your
It's
top one?
fascinating.
I'm curious.
Me, I'm empathy, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could. You're high in that too, but I also am really. My number 2 is achiever, and why I asked is because one of the things achievers do is they make a list just to be able to cross things off of it, and that's totally me. That's nothing more satisfying than me. Then I go, okay, 3,000 words. Yep, I did that today. Went to the gym. Yep, did that.
That may be number 6 on mine. I don't know.
It could be. Yeah.
Well, now I want to take this test. How do you do this? You
Oh,
sign up
well, you
for
know
a
what?
course with her or what?
Yeah, and it's you know what? We'll put her website stuff in our show notes, but Karen, I'll send it to you. And you really should do it. And the other thing that's fun about it, and you'll appreciate this, Jodi, since one of yours is connectivity, is it gives you a shorthand language with your author friends. Like, oh, you're an achiever too. Oh, I know exactly what the pitfalls are there, the good thing, whatever. So it's pretty fun. I love it personally, but I love stuff like that. So
Yeah.
But then I'd be like Jodi, I'd be worried like, oh, nobody else has this. I'm the odd man out.
That's good. It's good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Take your word
there
for
are
it.
there are no bad strengths. That's
They're
the
not.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's funny. I made my whole family take it, and Cliff and I are, I swear to God, exactly opposite. My number 34, which is your worst one, is analytical, and that's his number 1. I mean,
Really?
it's like an opposite thing. Yeah. So we are like the perfect match as far as, I always joke, like we'd be the perfect person if we were, melded into one. It's time for our fun extra questions. So Karen's going to do that for us. I'm curious. We'll see how you answer some of these, Jodi. This will be fun.
Okay.
These are non-writing related questions. Just spit out the first thing that comes to mind. So the first question is, what is one food that will never get past your lips?
Frog legs.
Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh, that woman, is it Catherine Winnick from Vikings? She was the pretty blonde, whoever was in Vikings.
Okay.
That's close enough. Yeah.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Fly.
What's your biggest guilty pleasure?
Dark chocolate and red wine.
What is the worst job you've ever had?
McDonald's. I was in high school.
Did you cook or were you behind the counter?
No, I was behind the counter as a cashier, but it's so greasy back there.
If you could instantly become an expert in something, what would it be?
Making money.
Okay, you got it. What's your favorite smell?
Citrus.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Snorkeled in Aruba and a green moray eel came up to me. It was coiled up like a cobra. And I almost drowned myself trying to get away. I was a flipper.
What's one thing you're really bad at?
I would say golf. I'm just not consistent with golf. Some days are good, some days are bad. What am I really bad? Cutting the grass, because I never do that. My husband knows.
Stay bad at it. Like that's my advice. If you could live your life over again, would you want to?
Yes. Would I change anything?
Whatever you want.
See, that's a hard question. I would live my life over knowing what I know now.
Okay.
All right, good
Hypothetically, you've got it.
Yay.
All right. Well, this has been super fun. And it just reminds me, Jodi, that you and I need to spend more time talking because we have so much in common,
Yes.
including our books. So we'll have to do that. But thank you for taking the time to be with us. Good luck with the new series. I'm excited to see how your cozies
Thank
take
you.
off.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Take care, Jodi.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. They hope you found it entertaining and informative. If you loved it, tell your friends. And if you have a moment, they'd love for you to post a star rating or review. This has been Behind the Book.